Okay, in this video, I'm going to cover flint knapping, particularly using pressure flaking. In the last video that I made for flint knapping or making stone tools, I covered making a preform biface, and that pretty much was made basically using percussion flaking with larger tools. In that case, I was using copper bopper. So in this video, I'm going to kind of skip or fast forward through the percussion flaking aspect of this, just so to keep the length of the video down, and also to really kind of focus on the pressure flaking. It is a bit long, and feel free to scrub ahead or to fast forward to your favorite parts. But I just want to make sure I cover a lot of the aspects of making stone tools and flint knapping. So I'm going to go ahead and start this, and I'll try to do voiceovers when I can.
Well, as it would happen, I was working on a piece, and this happened. This had some pretty good length on this, but I zigged when I should have zagged, and of course I broke it. And that's going to happen. That's just going to happen. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to salvage these two pieces, and they just become smaller pieces of work here. So I think I'm gonna make this one into a refined point. We're not gonna do a biface. I'm actually gonna clean it up, and it'll be a biface. And then we'll shape it into a point, and then we'll save this for another project. So this is a pretty good piece here, but it broke. Okay, I'm gonna go with my copper boppers here. The smaller, again, I meant to work smaller because it's not as big a piece as it started out. And I'm gonna just be reducing. I'm gonna try to straighten out the edges here and reduce a lot of mass there. There's a lot of still pretty thick in there. Let's see if I can get it thinner. So, but my strategy is I want to break up this mass here, and I want to create some platforms in here. So I'm going to just start doing that, and I'm going to have to get my braiders. I want to zigzag in.
So after zigzagging on this piece, basically what I'm doing is when you come to a square edge, you're just creating platforms in a zigzag pattern, so then you can start to decrease the mass by percussion flaking. You can do the same thing in pressure flaking, it's just smaller. So I've gone ahead and skipped that part, and I'm still using percussion flaking and just trying to get it as thin as I can before I implement the pressure flaking tool. So I'm coming across a problem here. So I need to set up a platform that I can get an isolated platform.
So now I'm going to switch to pressure flaking a little bit, enough percussion flaking. I want to be able to take a little bit more mass off of this, but I'm not able to get at it with my current bopper here. So I'm going to go ahead and start to pressure flake this in there and set up some platforms that'll probably help my percussion flaking. Let's see here. So pressure flaking, got a piece of rattan that I nailed, that I put a copper nail in, and then I just kind of sharpened the end after cutting the cap off of the nail. So I'm going to hold this in my hand like so, and then I want to pretty much attack the same way and hitting different platforms. And this allows me to get into hard to reach places, which will also help me set up my platforms so that I can get a better purchase. The braiding still applies. So I can pop those in there, and that helps, gives me a sharper edge, but I want to get some mass off of the base here. So I want to set up this, I want to isolate this platform here, and I want to take this out here. So I'm going to pressure flake here and here. Make sure I'm setting that up right. Isolation going on. Use my braider. Hopefully I can get this out of here. Get that mess out. Did it. Piece here. So I'm going to shoot across here.
So now I'm freehanding percussion flaking. So I just want to nick the platform.
And I'm going to take some mass out of the base here. Now I think I'm gonna flint, and I'm gonna pressure flake that. I need to get there. That's what I'm wanting.
So the leather pieces are very important for safety. You could wear gloves in addition too, but that's very thick vegetable tanned cowhide. And notice how I'm actually doubling it up. The shorter piece already has a hole in it because I've used it quite a bit. But I've created a longer piece that drapes over my wrist. You do not want to drive that piece of copper nor those obsidian flakes or other stone tune flakes into the palm of your hand. You will suffer some injury. So, again, a braid, a braid, a braid, so your platforms don't crush and they don't fail on you. So again, you're just nicking off pieces to drive flakes, but also to shape and to reduce mass. And I'm using...
So I'm going to switch to a pad with a notch in it so that I can get the longer flakes.
And that's a piece where I took some pieces of vegetable tanned cowhide and just glued them together. And I just cut a notch off the first one or the top ones. And it's a tool, it's a concept that I got from Paleo Man Jim that helps drives your flakes without interruption when you're pressure flaking. So now I'm trying to reduce mass. This probably wasn't the best choice because I ended up creating more of a hump in my point than I wanted to. What happens is, by placing it on my lap, the flakes can't travel as far as they should, as I'd like them to go. That drove some mass off, but it also created more of a hump. And every stroke, when you're percussion flaking, doesn't have to be hard. You have to gauge it so that a lighter flake or a smaller, shorter flake means a lighter touch, and vice versa. And a lot of times all you're trying to do is nick it. And that's why you want your percussion flaking tool to be domed. So now I'm just kind of studying and figuring out, which direction I should go next. Sometimes it can be frustrating. And I'm just trying to decide whether I should percussion flake or pressure flake. And at that, obviously, I've decided to pressure flake. I gotta go back to my notch pad so I can drive longer flakes. And in order to do so, the pressure flaker should drive a chip more inward. In this case, I'm actually going more downward. And I really should be driving into the mass to drive off longer flakes. But what I'm doing is trying to isolate a platform. And I decided to take some mass off of the tip. Start to shape the tip a little bit. I'm using more of a medium grit abrader. I don't want a big rough coarse abrader because for that size of piece, it would totally decimate what I'm trying to do. So by abrading, that created more solid platforms to drive deeper, better flakes. So over time, all I want to do is create a more symmetrical profile. And I'm working on trying to take mass off at the top. And what I like to do is I usually like to go from base to tip or from tip to base. The structure of your stone pieces really should be uh, like a lens. So the thickest, strongest part should be in the center. And that helps create breakage, actually. So I'm streamlining the profile a little bit. It's coming along quite nicely. I just created a continuous platform that I can start taking mass off with my pressure flaker. And here I'm using a copper tool that I nailed into a rattan handle. Completely primitive. I would use an antler tine. So as you pressure flake, the edges get really sharp, so it's time to be careful. But pressure flaking is also a way to touch up your stone tools as you use them and they become dull. Copper, antler, and bone are able to kind of grip the edge of the stone and really peel it off. Whereas some other materials really hard, like steel, really just break it off. So steel can be used, but amongst metals, copper is soft. So it's able to grab hold of the edge and kind of peel the flake off. Antler has the same properties, and bone does too. Really dense bone does. So I'm just aligning up and trying to shape and take off and dry flakes. And just really, pressure flaking is really used for refinement of your edge and shaping of your pieces. Make another pass. And again, I really should be taking my flakes more into the piece as opposed to down. So my pressure should be more towards my opposite fingers and not so much down into my palm. Hopefully I'll be able to demo that in another video. So the profile's coming along nicely. Again, it's got that hump on top that I'm not very happy with, but it'll work in a pinch, the finished piece would. So now I'm trying to work on the tip there. The tip is a little bit thick, so I want to be very careful about the tip so I don't break the tip. I want to try to keep as much length as I can. The tip and your base should be the thinner parts of your piece. The middle should be the thickest. Really should have changed the camera angle a bit so I'm not so off screen, but I'm hoping that those that are watching just kind of get the idea. Again, this gets a little bit boring or tedious where you just scrub through it. I make my videos really to archive what I'm doing, not so much for just pure consumption. So they do tend to be longer than a lot of other videos out there. So the chip really was starting to cause me a little bit of problems. I think in retrospect I should have worked on making it thinner up front at the beginning. But again, this is a learning process. Each project, each piece of stone has something to teach you. So that's why it can be really interesting uh, and engaging and addictive. Actually, flint knapping can be, as well as tanning uh, hides. The finished piece ends up being very satisfying. So I've got a bit of a hump. The nose is pointed down a bit. I don't really like that, so I'm going to try to bring it up. And the way to bring it up is to work on the side that is pointed down. So you want to take off flakes on the side that's pointed down, and that'll start to straighten the profile a bit. You may end up losing some length, but it'll straighten the profile. In a pinch, the stone the point will work just fine for whatever work you're trying to give it to do. But for symmetry, that's how you would deal with that situation. And sometimes you just have to be happy with what you get. This tip is giving me an issue. So there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and make another pass and kind of shape this up a bit. So I want to pull up the profile a bit so that the edge is in the middle of the mass, as opposed to being, you see more dome on top than on the other if you're looking at it from the profile. So notice in this, while I'm shaping, I'm not really using my notched pad. I really just want to shape and just start to take off or raise the platform. And there's some points out there that use a really serrated edge as well. I'm not sure what those points are called, but they do have specific names. And those are particular points, arrowheads, and specifically that have like teeth or serrations on the edges. And that's used with that. You do that with pressure flaking. Oh, that was a nice long piece. I gotta use a lighter touch when I'm going towards the tip because I don't want to break my tip. And we're gonna work on the base. I want to straighten up the base And really this is just for symmetry, so it looks nice. See, in reality, you don't really need to take the time and the energy or waste the caloric output to refine a stone tip to look like a quote unquote arrowhead to put on the end of a stick to get meat. That usually only happens after you've used whatever flake that will give you a sharp edge and you stick on the end of a shaft and you get meat. And then once you're sitting around the campfire with a full stomach, then you have time to refine your stone tools or refine your pieces, create artwork. Uh, we usually, from a evolutionary standpoint, we usually created art once we had an abundance. So there's something to be learned in regards to, why and how we've refined the tools that we have today. Because, when you're starving and hungry, you're not going to have too much energy to want to shape a piece of rock like this. You'll take any old piece of rock that's sharp enough and go upside the head or the skull of whatever animal you're trying to eat. And then once you have your full belly, then you have time to think about making things look pretty.
Okay, so it's not my best. It could be thinner, of course. Always something to strive for. But we started out with a bit of length, made some mistakes, ended up with a shorter piece. This would be a pretty hefty stone point. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna use my pressure flaker to give it some notches, and I'm not making this a replica of any sort of style of point necessarily. I'm just gonna put some notches in here just for the sake of demo, see how far I can. The base isn't as flat as I'd like it to be, but I should be able to do something with it, I think. So I'm just gonna break into the corners here with my pressure flaker. Just going in at the corners. And then what I want to do is flip it over and then take it, chips out of the other side. So that's kind of the start of it. You can see that.
In notching, you want to take advantage of the Hertzien cone that is created when you break off a piece. And every time I take off a chip, the other side gets a sharp edge. Then I can flip it over and use that sharp edge as a platform to continue to dig deeper into the base of the body of the point.
Running out of purchase. Let's see what we can do on this side here.
And so what can happen is the inside of your notch can get dull.
This now should be able to get a little deeper on the other side here.
And my pressure flaker isn't really as sharp as it could be, which would help for this type of work. You see the flakes are more shorter and round. That's that Hertzian cone that we're taking advantage of. Sorry that this is out of frame.
So that's looking pretty good for a notch. I'm happy with that. Let's see if we can do the same thing on the other side. So again, I want to start in this corner here. Start in this corner. Start making off flakes with my pressure flaker. And then flip it over. Flipping it over so that each side doesn't get too dull. So that you're always creating that Hertzien cone, that conchoidal fracture. It will create a platform for you to chip.
And a sharp pressure
This isn't going to be too stubborn for me.
Sharp pressure flaker really helps. Having a thin base and a sharp pressure flaker helps when for notching. So here I take some time to really try to create a platform to keep digging into the body of the point so I can create this notch. There, that was a good chip. That helped me a bit. Now I can start taking off and getting some length in the notch. Checking for symmetry. It's always important to do that from time to time, so to make sure that your finished piece looks how you want it to look.
Let's see, a little bit more work to do. Need to get up in there. Did it. Round off the bottom here. What I mean by shaping, I have my other shaping tool. I just kind of and that helps soften up the edges, or straighten up the edges rather. So I could possibly get up in there a little bit more and make it more symmetrical. That helped. So here we have, for the most part, just a point. This is an example of napping it from a piece that we had broken. So this is, for the most part, what we're working with. So there's that. We're using Pressure-Flaker and Percussion copper bopper to do the majority of the work. So there was percussion going on and then Pressure-Flaking going on. And with the Pressure-Flaking, you can drive into it and pop down, or you can scrape. You can shape by scraping on the sides. And then we use the Pressure-Flaker to create our notches. And this would be to tie this on or something. If I wanted to make this into a pendant, I could make it into a pendant or something like that. Got some little edges here that I want to kind of get rid of. So I'm not going to be real particular. So there we go.